That plain wooden box your grandfather kept his fishing tackle in might be sitting on a $500,000 secret. One cigar box sold for $575,000 at auction because it once held a president's cigars. Another went for $60,000 on Pawn Stars, pulled straight from someone's basement. 10 of these overlooked boxes have made their owners rich, and the oldest ones, the ones with faded tax stamps from the Civil War, are the rarest of all. Most people throw them away without checking. Let us find out if you are about to make that mistake. Here is what nobody in your family ever mentioned. That dusty wooden box in your garage, the one with the faded Cuban label you never thought to question, might be the only Cuban cigar you can legally own in America. Pre-embargo boxes, the ones purchased before Kennedy signed Proclamation 3447 on February 3, 1962, exist in a legal twilight. They are Cuban. They are authentic. And because of one presidential signature, they are the only Havanas an American can possess without breaking federal law. The catch is documentation. You need a tax stamp or a sales receipt proving purchase before the embargo. Most families threw those away decades ago, but the ones that kept them are sitting on serious money. A single pre-embargo Montecristo No. 2 is worth $350 today. A new one costs $17. Same brand, 20 times the price. The receipt date is the only difference. At a 2015 auction in London, a box of 250 Romeo y Julieta Invincibles sold for nearly $50,000. That works out to $200 per cigar. For tobacco rolled over 60 years ago, the market swings hard. In the mid-90s, pre-embargo boxes fetched $6,000. By 2000, the cigar bubble had burst and prices crashed to $1,000 or $2,000. The pendulum has swung back. Collectors are paying $3,000 or more for a box of 25. Flip the box. Look for the tax stamp. Check the lid for any receipt, any dated inscription, any proof that the cigars touched American soil before Kennedy put pen to paper. Without that documentation, the box is Cuban contraband. With it, the box is a legal relic of a vanished world. The quiet tragedy unfolds at estate sales. Families find these boxes, assume they are worthless because Cuban cigars are illegal, and toss them in the donation pile. They never checked the date. They never looked for the stamp. They handed away thousands because nobody told them the law had a loophole. The Cuban they threw out was the only legal one. The box your grandfather kept 40 years passes to your son. Does he know what he is holding? Or does it go in the donation pile the week you are gone? The next category does not require a presidential signature. It requires a brand that stopped existing 35 years ago. Davidoff and Dunhill both made cigars in Cuba. Past tense. Davidoff pulled out in 1991. Dunhill followed. By agreement, all Cuban stock was disposed of by the end of 1992. Every box that survived that purge is now a fixed artifact. They are not making more. They will never make more. And every time a collector smokes one, the world supply shrinks by exactly one cigar. The catch is condition. Cigars rolled 60 years ago may not smoke well. Collectors describe some as hot air in history, but they are not buying to smoke. They are buying what cannot be made again. That math has consequences. The Dunhill Estupendo, a 7x47 Churchill, earned a perfect score from Cigar Aficionado. A perfect score. The only perfect score the magazine ever gave a Churchill. The magazine has described it as perhaps the most coveted Churchill in the world. Single cigars from the 1980s, still in their tubes, sell for 500 to 700 British pounds. That is over $900 for one smoke. Boxes command even more. A 20-count box of Davidoff 80 Anniversarios from 1986 sold for 25,200 pounds at auction, about $35,000. The box included a cigar tube signed by Zeno Davidoff himself. The founder's autograph turned a valuable box into a small fortune. There is a pattern here, a cabinet of 50H. Upman Dunhill Selection Suprema Petite Coronas, pre-embargo vintage, carried an estimate of 6,000 pounds at auction. It hammered at 21,600, 5 times the estimate. The experts got it wrong by a factor of 5. The marker to look for is the production date. If the box says Davidoff or Dunhill, and that date falls before 1990, no factory on earth can replicate what you are holding. The molds are gone. The tobacconists have moved on. What you have is what remains, before the embargo, before Davidoff, before Dunhill. Back to the war that created the American cigar box in the first place. Abraham Lincoln's wartime Congress needed money to fight the Confederacy. The Revenue Act of 1864 required all cigars to be packed in boxes for the first time. Before that law, fewer than 1 in 10 domestic cigars came in consumer-sized packaging. Lincoln did not know it, but he created a collecting category that would last 100 160 years. The oldest boxes, the ones dated before 1864, are the rarest. They predate mandatory packaging. They survived by accident, not regulation. Collectors prize them above everything that came after. But even the Civil War-era boxes have authentication markers. The tax stamps from 1863 are all considered rare by the National Cigar Museum. The museum asks anyone who finds one to make contact. 1864 stamps came in 5 colors: green, rose, black, yellow, blue. Each color corresponded to a different tax rate. And then there is 1865, the year Lincoln was assassinated. For a brief window, a mourning tax stamp was issued, black border, 2 portraits of Lincoln. It was used for only a few months before the design changed. A cigar box with that black Lincoln Memorial stamp is not just a collectible. It is a fragment of national grief. Heritage Auctions has featured Lincoln cigar boxes. One Civil War-era example, 5 inches by 7.5 inches, bore the stamp Lincoln PTL above an eagle and a beardless portrait of the president. The manufacturer was Banse's Y Suarez of Havana. The box was described as never before seen. One detail separates treasure from trash: the stamp and the construction. Count the pieces of wood. Pre-industrial boxes were nailed together from 6 pieces of Spanish cedar. The nails, the joins, the stamp, the date. Each element tells you whether the box predates the law that made boxes mandatory. Most people walk away at this point. They see a faded stamp, assume it is too damaged to matter, and throw it in a trash bag. They do not realize that the fading is evidence. The damage is proof of age. The box that looks like garbage may be the one that belonged to a soldier who never came home. Paper tells a different story, not the box itself, but what decorated it. Between 1870 and 1920, American cigar labels became art. Chromolithography required up to 40 separate stone plates per image. Some companies used 24-karat gold dust in the embossing. Others used bronze. The labels that survived intact, especially the proof impressions printed before commercial release, are among the rarest artifacts in American printing history. Proofs were trial runs. Typically, fewer than 10 were printed per design. Some represent labels that never reached production. The design was rejected. The brand failed. The artwork was archived and forgotten. If you find a proof, you may be holding the only surviving copy of an image that was never meant to exist. The price range reflects that scarcity. Common labels sell for $10 to $25. Rare labels fetch $350 or more. And the rarest, the proofs with fewer than 5 known copies in the world, have carried valuations up to $150,000. The George Schlegel Lithographing Company of New York produced cigar labels for 90 years across 4 generations, starting in 1849. Their archive is now housed at the Winterthur Museum in Delaware. The labels your grandmother peeled off a cigar box in 1940 might have a sibling in a museum collection. The tell is the printing technique. Under magnification, stone lithographs show a stipple pattern in the color. If the dots are visible, the label was made between 1864 and 1910. If you see gold that catches the light at an angle, it may be actual gold leaf, not metallic ink. The material is the evidence. Most people peel these off and throw them away. The ones who check for the stipple pattern, the gold leaf, the proof number, those are the ones who walk out of estate sales with items worth more than everything else on the table combined. This is the mistake that costs people thousands. They see a torn label and assume it is ruined. They do not realize that even a damaged proof is worth more than a pristine commercial print. Rarity trumps condition. A unique label in poor shape beats a common label in perfect shape. Do not chase pretty, chase proof stamps. But before you start hunting for treasure, you need to know what you are actually looking at, because the most valuable boxes in the world have the most fakes. Over 95% of Cuban cigars sold outside authorized channels are counterfeit, not 90, not 80, 95. The numbers come from industry estimates, and they apply to boxes claiming Cuban origin, not just loose cigars. The good news is that the fakes are usually easy to spot if you know what to look for. Glass-top boxes are always fake. Habanos, the Cuban state tobacco company, has never produced a single box with a glass or clear plastic lid. If the box has a transparent top, it is counterfeit, period. No exceptions. Cohiba Behike cigars come exclusively in boxes of 10. If someone offers you a box of 25 Behikes, it is fake. The counterfeiters did not do their homework. Real Behikes only exist in one box size. Barber pole wrappers, the spiral pattern of 2 different colors, are exclusive to non-Cuban cigars. Any box claiming Cuban origin with a barber pole cigar inside is guaranteed counterfeit. What nobody checks is the barcode seal. Every genuine Cuban cigar box sold after the early 2000s carries a barcode seal from Habanos. Go to the Habanos website, enter the code, and the site will tell you if the box is authentic. If the code does not verify, you have your answer. Your phone can separate treasure from trash. use it. The next category lives in plain sight at estate sales: silver cups, crystal decanters, and occasionally a wooden box with metal fittings that nobody bothers to examine. That tarnished silver box at the estate sale, the one everyone assumes is worth its weight in scrap metal, the hallmark on the bottom might tell a different story. Victorian sterling silver humidors are exactly what they sound like. Cigar boxes made from solid silver by English and American silversmiths in the late 1800s. They were status objects for wealthy smokers, and they survive because silver does not rot. A Tiffany sterling silver Samaradoc cigar box sold at capsule auctions in June 2020 for $2,500. The estimate had been $800 to $1,000. It weighed 13 troy ounces and bore the marks Tiffany & Company, Sterling, Italy, 925. The Tiffany name alone pushed it above estimate. The Victorian makers are less famous but equally valuable: Arthur and John Zimmerman of Birmingham, Walter and John Barnard of London, George Betjeman and Sons. If you see one of those names stamped on the bottom of what looks like tarnished junk, you are looking at something a precious metals dealer would melt for a few $100s, and a collector would pay thousands to own intact. The hallmark tells you everything. Flip the box. Look for the maker's mark, the city mark, and the date letter. British silver has a coding system that tells you exactly where and when the piece was made. If you see a lion, you are looking at sterling. If you see a date letter, you can decode the exact year. The trap catches people who see tarnished silver, assume it is only worth melt value, and sell it by weight to a precious metals dealer. They get a few $100s for the silver content. They lose thousands because they did not read the hallmarks. The box was not scrap. It was Tiffany. Crossover territory begins here. Cigar boxes that have nothing to do with cigars anymore because someone famous touched them. In 1932, the New York Yankees presented Babe Ruth with a silver cigar box before Game 2 of the World Series. It commemorated Ruth becoming the first player to appear in 10 World Series. The box was designed by Arthur Kay and engraved by Marsh & Kay, New York City jewelers. Today it sits in the Baseball Hall of Fame digital collection. You will not find that box in your attic, but you might find what came inside it. An Ohio attic recently yielded over 600 baseball cards from the 1930s and 40s, stored in a cigar box for decades. The collection included 7 authentic Gowdy Babe Ruth cards, 3 Lou Gehrig cards, and all 4 Ruth cards from the 1933 Gowdy set. The cigar box itself was sold alongside the cards. Nobody threw it away. And then there is the Honus-Wagner connection. The T206 Honus-Wagner card, sold for $6.6 million in August 2021, was issued by the American Tobacco Company. Wagner allegedly refused to allow his image on cigarette cards, yet he endorsed cigars. There were 2 cigar brands named after him: Hans Wagner 10-cent cigars by Henry Rexius of Louisville. Hans Wagner cigars by Freeman Cigar Company. A cigar box lid from 1897 bears his image. Open the box. What it protected inside may be the actual treasure: cards, letters, photographs, ephemera. The box itself may be common. What it protected may be rare. Families stored valuables in cigar boxes because the cedar kept out moisture and insects. The box was a vault. The contents were the treasure. The mistake is assuming the box is empty or that the contents are junk. Someone in Ohio nearly threw away a cigar box full of Babe Ruth cards. They did not know what they had. They almost lost a piece of baseball history. Another box headed for the donation pile, saved at the last second. Art does not always hang on walls. Sometimes it holds cigars. In 1925, Cartier made a cigar box from sterling silver in the Art Deco style. One of those boxes is currently listed at nearly $50,000. The Cartier name carries weight. The era carries more. Art Deco pieces from the 1920s have a collector market that has nothing to do with tobacco. Rockwell Kent, the American modernist artist, designed a brass cigar box in 1928 depicting his wife Sally. It was made for A.G. Spalding and Brothers and executed by Chase Brass. Rockwell Kent, originals in any medium commands serious money. A cigar box designed by Kent is not a cigar box. It is a Rockwell Kent. Turn the box over. Look inside the lid. Check the bottom. If a known artist or designer signed the piece, the value shifts from Tabasciana to fine art. The box becomes secondary to the name. The trap catches people who see brass and assume cheap. They see a cigar theme and assume low end. They do not check for the maker's mark. They sell a Rockwell Kent for a few dollars at a garage sale because they saw a cigar label and stopped looking. The next box did not come from a store. It came from Fidel Castro. From 1969 to 1997, Trinidad cigars were available only to Castro himself. They were not sold. They were not exported. They existed solely as diplomatic gifts from the Cuban leader to foreign dignitaries. If you received a Trinidad box before 1998, you received it from someone who knew Fidel personally. Picture a state dinner in the 1980s. A foreign dignitary receives a wooden box from Fidel's own hand. No store carried it. No catalog listed it. That box, if it survived in a diplomat's estate, is what you might now be holding. The public release came in February 1998 at the Habana Libre Hotel. Before that date, Trinidad boxes carry no official markings. They were never meant for commercial sale, so they have no commercial stamps. That absence is the authentication. Authentication is nearly impossible without documentation. If the chain of custody is broken, the absence of markings becomes ambiguous. But if the provenance holds, a diplomat, a state dinner, a handshake with someone who knew Fidel, that absence is proof. A Trinidad humidor signed by Fidel Castro sold for $172,000 at auction. The pre-sale estimate was $85,000 to $128,000. It exceeded the high estimate by $44,000. The Trinidad 40 Anniversario, released in 2010, was limited to 400 humidors worldwide. Each contained 40 cigars, 400 boxes. That is the entire world supply forever. The authentication lives in the history. Where did the box come from? Who gave it to whom? Pre-97 Trinidad boxes came through diplomatic channels, not cigar shops. The provenance is the authentication. If your father received a box from a foreign diplomat in the 1980s, check the brand. It might be Trinidad. The boxes that shattered records come next. The boxes that made international news. The boxes that sold for more than houses. Milton Berle was a comedian. John F. Kennedy was the president. In 1961, Berle paid Alfred Dunhill of London approximately $800 to $1,000 to create a custom walnut humidor. It was engraved with the words, "To JFK, good health, good smoking." Berle presented it to Kennedy on Inauguration Day. 35 years later, that humidor sold at the Sotheby's auction of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis's estate for $575,000. The buyer was Marvin Shanken, publisher of Cigar Aficionado magazine. Milton Berle was present at the auction, trying to buy back his own gift. He was outbid. $800 became $575,000, a return of 718 times the original cost. But that was not the only JFK box. On Pawn Stars, a cigar box that once sat on Kennedy's desk in the Oval Office sold for $60,000. It featured an inlaid presidential seal and the engraving John F. Kennedy, My Cigars, 1962. 2 original Flor Extra Fina cigars were still inside. The seller had asked for $95,000. Rick Harrison paid $60,000. It was reportedly one of the largest payouts in the show's history. Another JFK box, a gift from Ferdinand Marcos in 1962, sold for $8,250. It had been given to Kennedy's butler Jack Spangenberg by Jackie Kennedy after the assassination. The provenance chain ran from the president of the Philippines to the president of the United States to the butler to the auction house. Not every presidential cigar box commands these prices. Provenance must be ironclad. A box with a story but no documentation is a conversation piece, not a 6-figure asset. The paper trail is the difference. And at the top of the market, the numbers become surreal. At the 2025 Habanos Festival in Havana, a Cohiba Behike humidor sold for 4.6 million euros, nearly $5 million. It contained 400 cigars, 100 each of Behike 52, 54, 56, and 58. The humidor was crafted by Ernesto Aguilera of Humidors Havana. The auction room was packed. 6 lots that night sold for over 1 million euros each. The total raised in one evening was 17 million euros, nearly $19 million for Cuban public health care, 4.6 million euros for one box. $12,000 per cigar. You are not competing in that room. But the same skill that separates a 4 million euro humidor from a $10 cigar box is the skill you now possess. Flip it over. Read what is stamped there. The ceiling has no limit. The floor is in your attic. The same test applies to every box in this video. Flip it over. Check the maker. Check the date. Check the provenance. Look for the signature, the stamp, the inscription. The difference between a $10 cigar box and a $5 million humidor is not the wood. It is the story the wood can prove. And here is the sentence I want you to carry out of this video. The outside of the box is decoration. The bottom of the box is confession. What is stamped, signed, or scratched into that base is the only testimony that matters. Learn to read it, and you will never throw away a fortune by accident. Those are the 10 boxes. Every one of them looked ordinary until someone flipped it over. So before you clean out the garage, before you let someone talk you into a bulk price for the estate, before you decide that Grandpa's old fishing tackle box was just a box, flip it over. The stamp is the proof. The signature is the story, and the fortune might be sitting in your hands right now. Who in your family kept things without knowing why? Who was the saver? That person might have handed you a fortune you have not checked yet. If you have ever worked at a cigar factory, an auction house, or a humidor manufacturer, drop what you know in the comments. Whatever you find in your attic this week could be the subject I chase next. If you have a box you are not sure about, tell me the brand, the stamp, and the date. Someone in this audience will recognize it. If you have inherited a box and already know exactly what it is worth, tell me the number. If you threw one away before you knew, tell me that too. If you think I overvalued something, tell me what the real market is. Subscribe to catch the next thing nobody noticed. The bell icon means you see the next discovery first. And share this with anyone who has ever inherited a cigar box without checking the bottom. The wood remembers. Make sure you do too.